Music. What would we do without music in our lives? It has the ability to touch us in so many important ways, so many significant ways. It can even take us back decades ago to a time in our lives, and we can know what we were wearing, what we were feeling at that moment in time. Imagine the creativity of the composers, of the singers and songwriters that we all love. But without the creativity and the love for that music, music wouldn't exist. And here with me is our very special guest, a connoisseur of a particular genre of music, Mr. LBR, my husband, E.J. Thomas.
Well, Randy, it's a delight to be on your show. I've watched you do so many of these interviews, and you've got quite a body of work up on YouTube now, and I'm very proud of you. I've seen some wonderful comments come back your way in terms of the lives that you've touched.
Thank you.
So when you thought about doing this together today, I thought, well, first of all, I thought, I'm not sure about the Mr. LBR thing, but sure. That's the way it is, and I'm pleased to be here.
Thank you. Welcome, EJ. So I know from living with you, having the pleasure of and privilege of being your wife, that you have a passion for the genre of music, of classical music, inspired by your dear mother. EJ, tell us about that and how that passion for classical music grew and how it touches you and blesses you to this day.
In many ways, Randy, it's an unlikely story because I grew up in a little town in southeast Ohio, 7,500 people, and I don't know that there were a lot of folks there that were into classical music, we'll say. Mother was a Southern belle, started playing piano from the time she was 4 years old. She had an aunt that was on the radio somewhere in West Virginia, and she would listen to her shows every week, and as a result of that decided she wanted to play the piano. And so she's classically trained, and to this day when I hear certain pieces I can see her playing the piano.
And it's difficult actually to develop a taste for classical music if you're not raised with it. And so what was it about classical music from the time you were a little boy that drew you to it? Was it the daily piano playing in your home?
Yeah, and I have to tell you, you say drew me to it. If Mother were here right now, she would say, wait a minute, I'm not sure he was so drawn to it because I always said he had these long fingers. He would be a great, piano player if he ever took it up. And so I was 6 or 7, and I tried it for a couple of years. And we had this Baldwin piano. Now, keep in mind, for me, this is what I saw. She would sit down and play Meloguina or Beethoven's Piano Sonata, and I would sit down, and I could not make the same kind of music. And it finally dawned on me, I don't know that I can ever get there from here.
How old were you?
Oh, I don't know, 6 or 7. And so it's like, okay, I'm going out and play baseball. And so I never learned to play. I regretted the fact that, I didn't take it up and stick with it. But I've never lost my love for it.
And so was it something part of your daily life, living with your mother, and what was that like?
Mother was an introvert, and so a lot of times she wouldn't play if there were people in the house. And I can remember many times I would hear it like through the screen door in the summertime, and I would just kind of sneak in and stand in the kitchen because the piano was around the partition, and I would just sit and listen to it. She was very good, and that's really where I developed my love for it, and I've never lost it.
And so did you still listen to it when you were in college while everyone was listening to the 60s and 70s music of the time?
Well, I have to say, Randy, I love just about every kind of music, including heavy metal, other than rap. I can't do rap. Yes, it's an art form, so I'm not criticizing the art form. I'm just saying that I'm not particularly fond of it. I always found, though, that listening to classical music set me up to study, set me up to write. And to this day, as much writing as I do in my job, I have to have classical music on. And I know that you've done some research in terms of the creative help that you get from listening to the right kind of music, classical in particular.
Yes. Yes. Well, so from the research, and it's if you're in the LBR community, you know that we discuss a lot of energy and frequency. And we are all energetic beings. We have our own electromagnetic signature, and emotions have their own signature. So if you look at the Hertz scale, shame and guilt and depression are on the very low end of the emotional scale. And as you spiral up, love is in the 500 Hertz, joy, bliss goes up to about 700. Well, we match different vibrations of people and emotions, and specifically music. And classical music has such a high vibration to it that scientific studies over the decades have clearly shown that playing classical music actually increases the dopamine that the brain produces. And as we all know, dopamine is the feel-good chemical. And so it actually elevates our mood, and it actually puts us in a calming meditative state, which allows us to be able to focus and study more.
Well, and if you can't play it yourself, listen to it.
And so I recall, I was not raised with classical music, although I was raised with music. My father tickled the ivories in another way called an accordion. And so we grew up with music in our home every day. And my father would strap on his accordion, and specifically on Sundays after church and before our Sunday beef dinner, he'd play the accordion, we'd dance around. And I can tell you that no one is ever depressed dancing a polka or listening to polka music. And so I'm always drawn to the classical music of polkas and Viennese waltzes. I love that tempo. But I wasn't raised with the classical music. However, all throughout law school, and when I was a law clerk at the 8th District Court of Appeals, which we wrote 10 hours a day, that was our job, writing appellate opinions, I had the public radio station on, the National Public Radio, NPR, playing the classical music all the time.
Yes.
Because running in the background would allow a space for my mind to be able to write. Very interesting.
And interestingly, the certain composers have that effect on me. Others I can't listen to when I'm trying to create or trying to write or trying to think because it's discordant and it upsets my ability to concentrate. And so I don't know what hertz they're playing, but I just know that as soon as that particular style of classical music will come on, I switch it to another one of my classical stations.
Well, that's interesting you say too about other genres of music that are intolerable to the spirit, I call it. So there are those that wind you up in a negative way, and then there are those that wind you up in a positive way and conjure up memories, so you know that there's a frequency and a hertz or a vibration going out because we're all vibrating. We live in an energetic universe. And so it's a very creative universe as well. And so EJ, what did you do in your life thus far in advancing your love for classical music?
Back in 1982, I was doing a lot of political work, working for Governor Rhodes, and I was getting ready to run for the Ohio House. A friend of mine and I came up with the idea of we need to have a Picnic with the Pops venue for Columbus, Ohio. Now, I'm not saying I invented anything because Boston's had theirs, Cincinnati's had theirs, but we didn't have
Cleveland.
it. And Cleveland. Oh yes, Cleveland. How could I forget Cleveland?
Yeah, how's that? That's not going to fall off, Rob, is it? No. Okay, good. We're good to go. Great. Okay, so here comes the finale of the 1812 Overture. Let me just have a little rehearsal. Hit them a bunch of times. Yeah, more. You're like every church bell in Moscow. Okay, great. You'll get the inspiration when you hear it. And wait for your cue. It's probably a good idea. Of course, the battle isn't won yet when this starts. Okay, just hang tough.
But there was nothing in Columbus. And so I went to the chairman of Big Bear, which was a grocery store chain at the time. And we went to the head of Channel 10 and said, look, we can get plenty of volunteers, but we don't have any money that, if the venue fails, we can't backstop it. We need sponsors to get this off the ground. So we went, and I went to the Symphony. They thought it was a great idea. We created a venue that, it doesn't sound as much now, but we were generating over $600,000 a year for the Symphony. We would have as many as 12,000 folks come to Picnic with the Pops in this open area. We would show up at 8 o'clock in the morning in our shorts and tennis shoes, and we would roll tables for the 200 tables we were going to have set up for the sponsors of tables and the higher ticket prices. And then at around 5 o'clock, I would go we were doing this on the grounds of Chemical Abstracts. This was their headquarters, so there was plenty of room to go in the showers and all that. And I would go put my tux on, and then I would MC the event that night from 8 to about 11. And then after the venue had finished out and the music was done, then I'd go back in, get back into my work clothes, and we'd go back out and collect trash, roll tables, and get ready for the next week. We would do this 6 Saturdays in a row. Now, interestingly, I knew that the Symphony had to practice the night before. And I thought, wow, what if we could put this to use to attract kids? What made me think of that was growing up in Logan, Ohio, where we had 3 stations, all of them snowy. But every once in a while, Leonard Bernstein would have one of his young people's concerts. And when Bernstein was going to play, I'd come home from school and Mom would say, hey, this is on tonight. You don't want to watch it? And I would. And I loved, he would do things like Peter and the Wolf. They were designed to appeal to young people. And of course, I already had a love for classical music, being with Mother. And so fast forward, I'm thinking, look at all the kids out there that have not been exposed to classical music. And so on Friday nights, we would have a picnic. I called it Popcorn Pops. And so we encouraged parents to bring their kids, spread a blanket, bring something to eat, have their kids in their jammies, no intermission. The music would last for an hour, maybe an hour and 10 minutes. And George Albert Schramm was the assistant conductor, and he was marvelous in terms of being able to relate to kids. You think of a conductor being the stuffy guy that, how's a kid going to relate to him? George was just this fun guy. He's just retired from, I think, the South Carolina, one of the symphonies there. But he really helped make that a hit. So we actually got a twofer out of that. So we had the Friday night Popcorn Pops, and then we had Picnic with the Pops the next night. I had a great time. I met some fabulous performers because since I was going to introduce them and MC the show, it was an opportunity to develop a little rapport. And so I can remember getting ready in the same room with Tony Bennett. Very down-to-earth guy. He was wonderful. He was very kind to me. And I thought, this is why he has been able to last as long as he has.
What a legacy. How long did you do that?
We started in 82. I emceed it through the Gulf War, and then
Which was
91. And so I was still involved with the symphony. I went on to the symphony board.
Okay.
And had
Well, I know they're very fond of you still.
Thank you. And I developed some wonderful relationships with the orchestra members, and when they ran into financial trouble, I emceed a benefit in the Ohio Theater for them one Saturday evening, and yeah, so yeah, I'm very fond of those who have dedicated their lives to music.
Yeah. So you mentioned when you were with Governor Rhodes, he was a governor of the state of Ohio, very prominent. He served a number of terms,
4 terms.
4 terms, 2 separate times, obviously. And you were a young buck working for him, I think, as a legislative liaison, helping work on the state of the state addresses, working with the members of the General Assembly. You eventually went on to elective office
Right.
for 16 years, I believe.
Yes, 8 terms.
8 terms until Ohio passed term limits, and you chaired some very powerful committees. And I say all this to say the left brain, right brain interaction is very strong in your life.
You know, what's interesting about that is that I always felt that the arts was the counterweight to my other life, which was flying for the military, which is a totally
And that too.
left brain world.
Right.
And so while I was in the legislature, when I was chairing the Finance and Appropriations Committee, I had worked with the arts community. In fact, I was on the Ohio Arts Council. And I know that some of our members were not wild about putting money into the arts. And I remember at a hearing that I was chairing that somebody popped up and, you know, wanted to take something out of the budget. And I said, I hope you all keep in mind that life without art is like sight without color. So interestingly enough, in that hearing, that that took care of the issue. They thought, well, if the chairman's in favor of this, I don't think we're going to be successful with an amendment to take it out.
Beautiful. And you were chairman of what committee? Was that the finance?
Finance and Appropriations.
Finance
Yeah,
Appropriations.
that's the How We Spend It committee. So
Okay. That's how you spend it. Well, what a great position to have, and then to have an advocate of the arts in that position. The arts are so important to society. It's not an add-on. It's not an additional to life. It is life itself. What do we have without it?
right, it is really a reflection of what's inside of all of us. When we talk about creativity, if it doesn't come from here, it doesn't manifest itself anywhere else.
Right.
So whether you're working on a term paper as a college student, or you're writing a report for your job, or you're painting a picture, or you're penning notes, you know, at our home we've got that music stand with Beethoven's piano concerto, and it's sitting there open, and I can, every time I look at it, I can still see Mother playing that piece. And that was a reflection of what was inside of her. You know, Mother was this very quiet, unassuming person, and yes, she loved to paint and was very good at painting. She was, it always struck me, here was this woman who, because she was an introvert, could fade into the background at a party, but she was a master at that keyboard. And when she sat down and really went to town, it was like, wow, is this the same person? Yeah, it's the same person. And it's because of what was coming out of her in terms of her creative ability.
Beautiful. How did that write on your soul as a little boy growing up in a home that valued the arts, modeled the arts for you? Because you are very left brain, so you have made your living a number of ways, and one of them, as you mentioned, is a pilot. So you were a politician in the best sense of the word, a public servant, and a servant in the military, having retired at the rank of colonel and flying all of your life for the 8th Air Force, and serving in the ways of protecting our country and protecting our freedoms. Very left brain, but yet you had this strong right brain always working in tandem with the left. My own personal Renaissance man, actually, is how I describe you. So I really think that it was the combination of not only being raised by your beautiful mother, but your Lebanese father who taught you a lot of lessons as well. But I know you up front and personal, right? You do this left brain, right brain dance that not everyone can master. How do you think you did that? Or
I don't know that I can pinpoint anything because it's not something you consciously think about. So mother loved to paint, mother played the piano, I could do neither. But when I was in grade school and high school there in Logan, I developed a love for photography. And I thought, this is something that I can do. And I took to it like a duck to water. I shot my first wedding by myself at 15 years old. I had a magazine cover when I was 15 from a shot that I'd taken in the snow at Old Man's Cave. And
in the Hocking Hills area,
in the Hocking
which
Hills.
Everyone is familiar with that.
And so that was, my contribution to art. And it was like a niche that I'd carved out for myself. And photography really is a combination of left brain, right brain, because composition is very much a left brain thing, because when you click that shutter and then you go develop the picture, if the composition is lousy, you're sitting there looking at a very disappointing, soggy piece of paper thinking, I wish I could do this over again because this is not very good. And so you learn very quickly. And Skip was the owner of the studio and quite the perfectionist, like my dad. He pushed me to develop that skill quickly. And fortunately I did. Or he, would have never had me shooting a wedding when I couldn't even drive, and he had to drop me off so I could do it, so he could run across town and do another wedding. So I would say that you, as a function of being able to get the most out of what the right brain is trying to create, you've got to employ that left brain in order to set you up for that kind of success, I think.
So the right brain is the seat of the creative and the left brain is the seat of the action.
Right.
Of deploying what the right brain desires.
It's almost like if you were building a house. You sit down with a set of plans. It's very left brain. You figure out where all the studs are going to go, where the walls are going to go, where the electrical outlets are going to go. But then as you put the house together, the elevation on the outside, whether it's hardy plank, or you want a stone front on the inside of the house. Do you want wallpaper on the wall, or do you want to paint the colors that you select? So there's a point where left brain takes a back seat because it's done its job, and right brain takes over.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's a great way of saying that. And you and I both love art, and art in oil paintings, historical pieces of battles in the past, me not so much.
Okay, that's just the difference between men and women. Okay, this is the divine feminine, so I get it.
And the sacred masculine, and the rugs, and it's very important for us to have beauty in our surroundings, because that's a way in which we're able to have art in our homes, from music that we love, to the creativity I use in cooking, to the creativity you use in your problem solving, from now as being CEO and president of Habitat for Humanity. There's lots of problem solving and still in line with your heart of service. And so creativity can be in all of those ways, and a combination of them. So as we're doing this series on cultivating creativity, it's even reminding me how much I value the creative in the daily chores, by doing a tablescape for dinner, or setting up a little charcuterie board like I just did for us before this. So there's an artistry in all of that. So you don't have to be a painter or a composer. You can even be a connoisseur of the painters and the artists and the composers that you love. And that's adding to the creativity of it all.
And don't you think that builds on itself, because you can start out liking certain elements of a genre, and then as you develop, for instance, music, you develop a finer ear, and so then the repertoire of things that you listen to becomes greater. For you as a cook, your left brain is the list of everything you need to pick up at the store in order to then use the art form, which you do well, and actually creating something. Now, I have to say that I'm not even qualified to be in the kitchen. I'm good as a busboy and washing up after. Now, I do that fine. Anything beyond that is a disaster. And so I could do the left brain, go to the store and get the items, but then I need to give it to somebody whose right brain knows what to do with it.
Thank you. This is Mother's Day week that we're rolling into.
Yes.
And the show is dedicated to your beautiful mother, Shirley.
Yeah.
What would you like the LBR community to know about your mother and the impact of a creative mom on a home, to encourage the mothers out there and the grandmothers out there to set the examples for creativity and to add that kind of beauty in the everyday moments of life? Because really that's how we live our lives, the everyday moments. If you live for weekends and vacations, you're going to end up being largely disappointed. Why not make every day a little special with touches of creativity all throughout the day?
One of the things that comes to mind, Mother was a homemaker. She did a great job at it, but there's a certain element of stress that goes with homemaking, raising rambunctious kids, and I was a rambunctious kid, high energy, and go outside and play, you're driving me crazy. And I think that from her perspective, I'm not sure that she fully appreciated her gifts. Mm-hmm. And so, because that sitting and playing the piano or painting necessarily had to take a back seat to making sure that we're going to have dinner on the table, that we've got a clean house, that the laundry is done.
It's a lot of work.
And so, I guess if Mother were here, she might say, look, kids, make sure that you take time to not only practice your creativity, but appreciate the creativity that you have from within, because in doing so, it will tend to flow more easily. And to recognize that it is as valuable in terms of your life balance as everything else you're doing. And so if you want to maintain a healthy relationship up here, so that you stay up, so that you relish being in the moment each day, because we only get so many seconds in the day, and the grandfather clock is very instructive. You can't speed it up, you can't slow it down. It's tick and it's tock. And if you miss the ability to enjoy that moment, it's gone forever. So Mother, I think if she were here, she would say, yeah, what EJ said.
Well, Shirley raised a beautiful son.
No, thank you.
Along with her.
She has to say that, by
the way. And I'm the recipient of the work that your mother did with you and your father did with you. I'm one of the recipients in my family of having such a beautiful man in my life and our lives. So thank you to your mother, and thank you, EJ.
Thank you, honey.
You're welcome. Love you.
Love you.
Stay tuned. More to come on LBR and our continuing conversations on cultivating creativity.